Welcome to today's relaxed Bible podcast moment. Grab a coffee, take a breath, and let's slow down together. Today we're sitting with a single verse that carries deep comfort, especially for people who feel worn down, forgotten, or bruised by life. The verse is Jeremiah 30-17. For I will restore health unto thee, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord. Because they called thee an outcast, saying, This is Zion, whom no man seeketh after. Let's settle into this gently and unpack what's happening here. Forest, the original setting, a wounded people. Jeremiah spoke during a painful time in Israel's history. The nation had been broken by consequences, exile, and loss. They were not just physically scattered, they were emotionally and spiritually exhausted. People looked at them and said, nobody cares about them anymore. They were labeled as outcasts, and that's where God speaks. Notice something important. God doesn't begin with correction here. He begins with restoration. I will restore health, I will heal. The promise comes straight from God's heart. The people didn't earn it by being perfect. They received it because God is faithful. That alone is a deep breath for the soul. I will restore health, more than physical healing. In the KJV wording, health carries the idea of being made whole again, not just patched up, not merely surviving, restored. Think about how modern life wears people down. Constant pressure to perform, relationships that disappoint, silent struggles nobody sees, the feeling of being overlooked or misunderstood. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't bleed. They just quietly ache. This verse reminds us that God's healing reaches into places people can't see. He restores what feels lost: peace, hope, identity, even joy. And notice who does the work. God doesn't say, try harder and maybe you'll heal. He says, I will restore. That shifts the burden from our shoulders to his hands. 6. Because they called thee an outcast. This line hits hard even today. How many people walk around carrying labels placed on them by others? Too broken, too late, too different, too much history. Maybe someone dismissed you. Maybe you felt left behind while others seemed to move forward. Social media can make this even sharper. Everyone looks connected while some feel invisible. God hears that pain. He acknowledges it directly. He doesn't pretend the rejection didn't happen, but he also refuses to let that label define the future. The world says outcast. God says restored. That's a complete reversal. Making it personal for today. Let's bring this into the living room of real life. Maybe your wound is exhaustion from carrying responsibilities no one notices. Maybe it's heartbreak. Maybe it's regret over past choices. Maybe it's simply the quiet fear that things will never really change. Jeremiah 30:17 reminds us that God specializes in restoring what others write off. Healing doesn't always look instant. Sometimes it's slow, like sunrise instead of lightning. But restoration begins the moment God speaks hope into the situation. And here's the beautiful part. God's promise isn't based on public opinion. Even when people say, no one seeks after you, God says, I see you. That's powerful in a world where many feel unseen. Quote, a quiet reflection. Imagine sitting with God in a calm space. No noise, no rushing, just honesty. You bring your wounds, your questions, your tired heart. And God responds, not with rejection, but with a promise. I will restore, I will heal. Sometimes faith is simply believing that God's voice is louder than the labels we've heard. And maybe today is just a small reminder that your story isn't over. Healing is not weakness. It's God rebuilding strength where life tried to tear things down. Final thought. Jeremiah 30-17 is a verse for anyone who has ever felt forgotten. It tells us that God doesn't abandon wounded people. He moves toward them. He restores health, heals wounds, and rewrites identities. So if you're in a season where you feel like an outcast, hold on to this truth. God's restoration is stronger than rejection, and his healing reaches deeper than any wound. Take a breath. You're not unseen. You're not finished. And God is still working. If this resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more.